All right. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 11 of A Game of Holes. Tonight, we're going to be doing the part two that I promised everyone far too long ago about the Battle of Hydra taking place way back in March. It was, of course, never my intention for it to take this long to get everybody together to sit down and talk about a little bit of that's just kind of how it went, and then FanFest, and then this and that. The next thing you know, it's June, and we're sitting here talking about stuff that happened 3 months ago. Now, I'm going to try to make that not the worst. So I think, there's a lot of stuff that's happened between then that's possibly a bit relevant. So, for this episode, we're going to go through all the same stuff that we did as episode 9, where I had Steel Roamer and Vec from Wholesale on. But we're also going to talk a bit about what happened after, specifically internally with Pause Party. What did they do after? How'd they, come to some of the decisions they did? And then, we're going to just talk about how Pause Party's doing. It's been 3 months, so maybe Steel and Vec, I think, we talked a little bit about some of our predictions about what they would do and where they'd be at, so we can see how many of those were actually right or not right. So roughly what we're going to talk about tonight, and again, this is the Pause Party, the Defenders, point of view from the whole event. We're going to talk a bit about the lead up. I'm going to poke them about some of the accusations or things that we heard on the other episode, coming in from the attackers, what they might agree with, maybe I imagine a lot of what they probably don't. And then we're going to just dive right in and talk about what went down the first week, thoughts, feelings, why they did some of the things they did. Same deal for the second week. And then, like I said, we'll talk some aftermath, and then we'll talk about 3 months later. So, introducing our two guests, we have the CEO, Space Mom of Pause Party, Keskora Yaar.
Hi. I appreciate that everyone calls me Space Mom even outside of my own corp now.
And then
something I can't escape.
And then we have Valasius, one of the primary fleet commanders for Pause Party, also joining us.
Hello.
So they'll, I'm sure, talk much more in the very short future. People that are watching, feel free to let me know if I need to adjust their mic volumes anymore. I did play with them. They should sound pretty good, but I know that's kind of always the running difficulty for trying to get a bunch of different people together. So I guess without further ado, we'll just dive right into, we'll cover it from the start. So for people that maybe have short-term memories, or maybe they're tuning in and maybe they just didn't watch or listen to episode 9, back in mid-March, the biggest thing going on in wormhole space at the time, and for the most part, the biggest thing that's really happened, nothing bigger has really happened since then, has been the eviction of Pause Party from their Class 4, which they named Hydra. Primary aggressors were Shekel Squad, Hull Control, and Wholesale Operations. In episode 9, I had Steel Roamer and Vec from Shekel Squad and Wholesale, respectively, giving their 2 cents about why they did it, how they did it, and we talked a lot about, a lot of that part. So here we are, and we're gonna just give other side of the coin, other part of the story. So Steel, several times in when I talked with him last about this, was pretty adamant that he was under the impression that you guys really should have seen this coming at this point, and that you'd been warned that if you kept doing things that you were doing, that this kind of thing was going to happen. From your perspective, would you say that did you actually kind of see this coming, I guess, step one?
Oh, I certainly thought it was plausible, and sure they did a very good job keeping everything under wraps, but you see and hear inklings when things are coming like this, and we didn't know exactly when, but I always thought it was going to be probable, based on the motivations, how much ISK would drop, and also that we'd be probably the conduit for the biggest fight ever, because we have a lot of friends. So I definitely saw it coming, but had no idea when it would be.
I saw part of it kind of coming in some ways, but maybe not to the same extent that it played out. I mean, I knew that Shekel was really pissed at us. They had been for a while, so the fact that they wanted to try something against us was not surprising. To the extent that they got wholesale and whole control involved, I didn't particularly see that part coming in a way. I wasn't exactly surprised that they joined in, but I wasn't surprised that Shekel was the ones to try to instigate it either.
All right. So yeah, I think that's probably what we really expected. I get the most you really can expect. You know, it's always hard to really tell how much at face value you want to actually take people. And Steele's not exactly known as being somebody that you really take everything he says too seriously, because Steele says a lot of stuff. So I can easily see why, you know, it's easy to say, okay, well, Steele says they're going to come evict us, so we'll see how that goes. So stuff that you were doing, do you guys see? I mean, so, you know, and I wouldn't be surprised if the answer is no. Do you guys feel that stuff that you were doing that was, you know, really getting Steele and Shekel all worked up was warranted, or are they just being, you know, whiny little bitches, or do you kind of say, yeah, we were being dicks, a little bit of both?
I mean, the way I kind of see it is that from dealing with Shekel both as a friend, because before all of this kind of went down, I consider them a really close ally of theirs. We went to Eve Northeast, we punked out in the same cabin, they picked us up from the airport. We were, you know, pretty close, and I thought we had a pretty decent relationship. But it kind of came to me that Steele had an ideal for wormhole space in his mind, this kind of space Bushido kind of thing. And in his mind, people that he fought, and especially friends of his when they fought, were supposed to kind of follow this unwritten rule of wormhole Bushido. And I have a really hard time trying to follow that because I don't understand all of what it was, because a lot of it existed purely for Steele and his guys. And trying to enforce a certain gameplay mechanic onto other people is always rough in this game, because no matter how hard you try to make fights even, to be fair, to be friendly, to do all this kind of stuff, even with the best intentions, half the time it will never work out that way, because it's Eve and shit's unpredictable and shit always happens crazy. So even, you know, us trying to bring good fights and be quote honorable or whatever, still wouldn't fit into the same mold that they were expecting. And I think, and because we did have a relationship prior to this, it pissed them off on a personal level because we had a personal relationship. And it was never my intention for that to happen, but I saw it happen despite my best attempts to not have it happen, if that kind of makes sense. So I don't think that they're being exactly whiny bitches or that they're like making it up. I just think that, you know, what they were expecting to see happen and what they wanted to have happen didn't happen. And then it became our fault for not making it happen the way they wanted it to.
It can definitely get really tricky, right? Since there's no actual rules to wormhole space, you know, I did an entire podcast episode on this. I want to say it was episode 6, the 3 cap rule, where I got Steel Roamer again and Ace from Novak, and we just kind of talked because, you know, he was Shekel was really upset about a bit of stuff going on back then too. But you know, there's lots of people have a very different idea of what wormhole space is supposed to be, and all you can do is when people violate your imaginary wormhole rules is you get a little upset about it. I mean, you know, we've got other sets of, you know, wormhole Bushido rules that we've heard, like you've got the, you know, after self-destructing all your ships when you win from prom. I'm not sure anyone follows that one, but he's pretty adamant that that's how high-class wormhole space does it. So I guess we'll just, you know, keep waiting to see that.
That's in some ways, like I kind of think back to you know, talks with other wormhole CEOs I have. Like I've been friends with like Tiny, you know, Tim Naring, I miss him and stuff like that. We had conversations kind of about this, and like it kind of got to the point where, you know, we felt either we were gonna, like there's no middle ground when it comes to having Wormhole Bushido are having good fights. Like, you know, no matter how hard you try, it's never going to work out. Someone's always going to get butthurt. So in the end, I felt like one of the best things to do is always just do your best and expect the other side to also do their best and want to win. And sometimes it's going to end up being, you know, lopsided against one side. And sometimes it's obvious if like they have 5 dudes and you have like 30, like, you know, that's different. But when you see another group in chain and you're trying to form up and you want to get a good fight, like there was one instance even with Shuckle before all this happened where we were in chain and we wanted to fight. So we get into a connection farther down and we wait. And as they're forming up, they get ready, they leave, and they get caught by a drifter on their route to come fight us. And so we went ahead and waited for them to kill the drifter. We didn't engage them. We were like, they'll kill it and they'll come fight us and they'll be fine and we'll fight then. But in the time it took them to kill the drifter, they kept pinging and got so many people on that by the time they killed it and came to us, they outnumbered us by a shit ton and just blobbed the piss out of us and we lost horribly. And so at that point, it's like, okay, well, we were trying to be, you know, honorable, letting them come, not trying to ping out the ass, just, you know, seeing what happens, letting them take their time to kill the drifter and not fuck with them while they're doing it. And then in the end, you know, we got blobbed and we lost, and you know, it kind of sucked, and I was kind of pissy at the time. But then at the end of the day, it's a fight. Didn't go the way I wanted it to, so you pack up and you move on because that's wormhole space. There's always going to be fights that don't go your way, and getting super bent out of shape about it isn't going to make the game enjoyable. You have to just look at what you did wrong, how you could do better, and then move on, and expect that everyone's going to be doing that. And so the next time you engage them, they're going to be smarter, and you're going to be smarter, and the fight will be different.
I'm trying not to chuckle too hard here, just because we're sitting here complaining about something that at this point is wholly irrelevant, since for things we'll get into a bit later, I don't think we're going to hear people complaining that Shekel's blobbing them anymore.
I think we'll find a way to still talk about it in wormholes. Like 6 months from now, we're still gonna see that, you know, Dread 5 undock meme make a comeback.
Well, I mean, Novak's still around, right? So we can still keep memeing on that stuff, but so let's move up just to you know, make sure that we keep the ball rolling. So we've kind of established, I think, that you guys were not super surprised that that they showed up at your doorstep. Obviously you never know exactly when, but walk me through a little bit of your initial reactions to, oh shit, there's a giant Macarial fleet in our home system. And a little bit about the first, the first couple days.
Yeah, I'll take it as I was on when they first infilled. I don't remember the exact number they had, but it was something in the lines of 20 max, with an amount of Guardians. I don't remember exactly how many. At that point on, we right away it was like, all right, this is it. It's finally happening. We're being evicted. It was pretty obvious when they first infilled that was what was going to happen. So we get what caps we can, and then the rattlesnakes. And we just get to 0, and we focus on just starting to roll the hole, because we know that because the C2s always get the case-based connection, that's going to be probably their way in. So we get there, and then it's this total shit show that they get their exact weapons that they want onto us. The rattlesnakes obviously aren't really going to be able to do anything at that range with how they were fit, and then the dreads just weren't able to break anything at that range. So we were lucky to be able to smart bomb the bubbles and get some of our caps out, but that was like a total whelp, and that was just horrible that first time. So at that point, we kind of just, I don't want to say gave up on hole control, but at that point it was pretty obvious that we needed to wait for one of our maximum forms to be able to make any kind of play. And I'm sure there's some more experienced people out there saying, well, why aren't you yacht rolling? And that was part of our inexperience, where we should have been basically the entire time. But that was basically the first day, and after that, they just kept flooding in.
Yeah, I remember one. I think, you know, it's always really easy from the bystander, or, you know, not directly involved initially, to be like, oh, I'm sure they can handle that. Because the very first reaction, when I forget who, it might have even been one of you two, that like pinged me, letting me know, like, hey, there's a whole bunch of these dudes in our home system. And I remember one of my first thoughts was, that's not too much. I'm sure they can pull something together and fight that off. But the number of how many Macarials it was kind of went from, we can push this off, to this is going to be significantly harder very quickly. So your very first fight, you threw down, and we tried to establish hold control, and and kill some stuff. What what time of day did you guys try to pull that off?
Well, the first infill happened right as I was getting off of work because I was walking to my car when I was getting all the pings. And I live 45 minutes away from where I work, so I had a very long car ride home. So this would have been, mid-evening US time when the first happened. And they were trying to get a fight together right at that moment to do the first, hold control attempt. We figured that our time was of the essence, and they needed to move quickly to not get anyone else in. But they had all of our entrances, and there were 3 at the time. So, they brought in a whole lot more, really, really quickly.
That's always that's always the dilemma, right? Do we attack now and try to take them before they get even more? But if you fail, you also generally, set yourself in for an even weaker position to try again later, assuming that you lose a lot of pods, which I'm pretty sure you guys did. Although you got a lot of them back in, if I recall, from the very first
we should
brawl.
get to later. the downtime.
Yeah, that was that very first attempt. We lost some stuff and we were able to get back in, but we couldn't hold it, and that was when they were starting to infill pretty heavily.
So, was the initial attempt for hold control? Is this the where we talk about the ships that you decided to try to use, or is that a different fight?
Well, the armor rattlers were in that first fight.
Because I mean, I don't think we can go through this discussion without people hearing it from the mouth of Pos Party why their home defense fleet was armor rattlesnake.
Yeah, we can get into it. So while I didn't make it at the time, I support the person who did make it, because way
Clever
back
side stuff.
when
It wasn't me, it was someone else. Yep, here we go.
Yeah, but I support it back when he made it, is what I'll say. Even though we should have been in Balgorns at the time he made it, but basically, when it was created, we needed a home defense, subcap fleet that was going to be around for 15 to 20 people, because the remaining extra 15 people were all going to be in caps. So at that point, like, what else are you going to put them in? Like, if you put them in 15 max, they're just going to eat shit to whatever other eviction fleet that's going to be there, and they're not going to have enough critical mass to even volley anything worth a threat that would be credible to us. So at that point, we knew our only really big card to play would just be our caps, and we just wanted to have a subcap fleet that would be able to support it. So the idea was that you warp in on them, you tackle everything, and then you let the Hydras and carriers just shred everything. And that was always the play, even during the Fortizar fights. But looking back, we definitely should have had tackle Balgorns instead, definitely, because the bigger range increase would just be a lot more flexible, because you have to allow time to be able to warp and then land and then lock everything up and then tackle it. But I don't know, and a lot of it also, even after we got massive, there's someone who might say, well, why didn't you just disregard it after you got massive? Because we did get massive. Really, I just didn't have the balls to tell my members they need to sell their billionist ship because we need to upgrade to something better. So that's really where it came from.
And it was relatively less than successful, would you say?
There were times when it was basically useless, and then there would be other times when it would hold the Mac down and it would die. It'd be something like that. But it doesn't, just because it did its job doesn't mean it was the right ship for the job. Like, the tackle Balgorns would have been much better.
So but safe assumption that we're not going to see armor rattlesnakes from you in the future.
Well, not from us. Someone else used it in a brawl a couple months ago. They had like one. They had one armor snake. I wish I could have the battle for it saved, but somebody did it against somebody else in C5 space and had just like one in some heavy armor fight, which was really funny. But yeah, definitely never again.
I mean, the fact that you're in a pulsar is hopefully also a guarantee of that, but I've been surprised before. Alright, so initial attempt for hold control didn't go very well. I can't exactly remember timeline where this was in relation to when I and a couple of our, TDSN, we came in a couple attempts to come bust some moves. Almost entirely all unsuccessful. I know we had a couple of really early morning, late night border skirmishes going on.
Basically, the kind of timeline was they infilled on a Wednesday and hit some of our structures, then hit the rest of them the next day. Most of our timers were set for the weekend because we thought we'd have all of our people online and we'd be able to max field, but it also meant they'd have their majority of their people online too. So double-edged sword for there. But we made basically one attempt on Thursday, I believe, in an attempt to get people in. And then the timers were all Saturday. So we got you guys and some sound people in on Thursday, of sound mind people, that is. And then my big last attempt to get everyone in the best I could was Friday, super late into Saturday, super early morning.
You can't forget the Aussies though.
So that my big plan after we tried to get TDC and sound in and we were relatively unsuccessful. We got you guys in and then your ships died, so we still had pods. We had pods, which was nice, but we didn't have a lot of ships to give you guys. And so my one last big hurrah was to make an attempt at downtime on Friday into Saturday, and have a bunch of people ready to go and make a play for whole control then. And part of what was leading me to think this would be successful was we had exit strategy, which is the biggest Australian time zone wormhole corp, willing to come help us out. So this was going to be their prime time where they'd have most of their people on. And we were hoping that it would be, it'd be a couple days after they started whole control and the attackers would be, asleep mostly and maybe not as quick to alarm clock on. So I had, everyone contacted who had caps and we were going to make a big play to try to get as many people in as we could. So this was like the one big master plan kind of we had to make a defense. And so we woke up at downtime, we alarm clocked in, we got everyone on, we made our play, we were able to get whole control for a short period of time. And I have to really hand it to those guys. They alarm clocked like crazy, and we had one whole basically before they fielded their defense fleet on top of us, and we were able to get a spattering of exit strategy in before it collapsed. But it was pretty intense. I was not expecting their response to be as quick and as strong as it was.
Their time zone coverage throughout every single time was just phenomenal on their part.
Well, I mean, it's a little easier to coordinate those things with some heads up. You get enough people, even a small slice of them can afford to either not work that day, take the time off, or maybe they just didn't work in the first place, and you start to get a increasingly sizable team of people that can no life it for a couple of days. And I don't know what the exact total number was, but I'm pretty sure that even on their end, we're talking more than 200 real people helping put that whole thing together. So very believable for sure.
They had planned it. I know a lot of people had taken off work and everything for it, and as we got closer to the timers, it became more intense. And so, I mean, they had a good response, and we were able to get that hole open, get a couple people in, and then it rolled, and we got another one. And actually, we were warping to the new hole as downtime hit, and that was when we had that real wackadoo wormhole glitch, which I believe is now considered an exploit because we had some people that. It has been fixed. Okay, that's good.
It got fixed like a week after all this shit went down. But because if there was a ship on grid with where the wormhole was supposed to be, right as it tried to spawn the wormhole, it would not spawn the wormhole and then just go about doing the rest of its boot up shit. Because I remember getting stuck. I I got stuck on the other side, but you know, not super surprisingly, downtime shenanigans is all fucky. So I actually just couldn't even fit through the wormhole. It just kept telling me that the wormhole had collapsed, even though I'm watching people in scepters fly right by. Uh,
Yeah, well, and so that wormhole glitch happened. We were still fighting on that hole. That was when the vehement went down. Was during that fight, and they managed to get before downtime hit. There were a few like yachts or rollers or something that went through from on their side. So by the time we got there and the hole had disappeared, it was already stage 2 mass at that point. So we finished our fight. The vehement went down. I think we lost one to Nazu as well, and we all warped off and went back and got back up in our citadels. And a couple people, I think when we counted it, we had between 6 and 10 people were able to come back in pods through that wackadoo wormhole. So I know some people were saying that we got like 24 or all these people and all this kind of shit. Posby got 4, and I believe Sound got 6 people back in. So it wasn't a huge, crazy.
So let's argue off of things that don't matter for just a minute here. 3 months ago 2 months ago when I sat down and had this conversation with Steel and Vex, they were pretty adamant that bugged wormhole completely saved you guys, and without it, you would have been toast that weekend.
No, not at
So
all. I mean,
your sense.
Yes,
Well,
not at all.
Vex's ability to fly in a straight line into Hydra, I think, kind of sealed that deal for them. Kappa.
No, the thing is, though, by the time we got to the final fight on Saturday, our numbers were such that and it had nothing to do exactly straight up with numbers. It had to just do with ships. Like, we just didn't have the ships in whole to be able to supply everybody. Like, when we were handing out ships, we were handing out the last dregs of whatever we had in the hole. Like, we didn't have 100 Macarials ready to go to hand out to people. So even if we had 30 people that could have gotten it in pods, we wouldn't have been able to field them with a lot of ships. So I mean, we were able to get a couple people that got potted out in our attempt at downtime to get back in, basically. Like, the vehement pilot was able to get back in, but now his vehement was dead. We had a handful of sound people get back in, but it wasn't a lot, especially because that hole collapsed. It was open for like a half hour to an hour before it collapsed. And it was also, this happened at downtime. So this was so early that we didn't have a lot of people on who could have even infilled. We just had whoever had been online during our attempt. So we got them back in, which was, I mean, that's not nothing. I mean, that's still important to have as many people as we can. And it was definitely was helpful, but it wasn't some sort of groundbreaking, game-changing kind of thing, because, I mean, that just wasn't possible at that time, Like, I don't know what would have been so game-changing during a half-hour window like that. I guess if all of you guys had been online, like if everyone at TDC had been online at 5 a.m, we might have been able to get every one of you in and then handed you guys bullshit to fly.
I mean, we did get handed some ships, and yeah, bullshit's probably a good way of describing it.
It was bullshit. We were down. Basically, everybody in the corp gave throw all of our ships into a communal corp hangar, and we had basically 2 people that rotated who were the quartermasters, we called them, and they were just in charge of handing out ships. That was their entire job. And people would open up trades and open up a convo and be like, I could fly X, and he would just give them whatever the fuck he could. And it was getting down to like, if we had like VNIs, we were like, okay, here, have a VNI, have a Gila, why not? Fuck it, just like everything we could, we were passing out.
Gilas are pretty good.
Hey, they're fine, but when you're up against Macarials, there's only so much that you can do, And so we were seriously down to the last dredges of our ships. And those 10 people that got back in were helpful, but also they weren't like some of the people that were the game changers in our last fight, because that fight on Saturday really came down to a few people who were really on top of the ball, who were really playing the game at an amazing level. And I have to hand it to those like handful of people. Those are the ones that won us the fight. Not our numbers, not our ships, not our home field advantage, not that wormhole that bugged out. It was a few of our people who really worked together and made it happen. And that bugged wormhole wouldn't have changed that.
Okay. All right. So Other key things that you want to mention that you think are, worth mentioning as a part of the story for the first week. So basically, if and correct me if I'm remembering any of these bits wrong, because I'm sure it's a bit fresher and more detailed in your memory than mine. We had 2 fort timers at the same time. They blew up one, and they bled enough, just as the fight raged on, to not manage. Then they gave up on the second one, right?
No, so we had 4 Fortizars total.
Yep. Okay.
One of them had been anchored like literally a week prior, so it was like almost entirely empty. And 2 of them had been up for a decent amount of time, and then one of them was our main Fortizar, which was called Crazy Glue.
Mm-hmm.
And Crazy Glue was the very first one to come out of its timer, along with the crappy one that had just been anchored, came out along with it. So we had basically our most juicy asset and our least juicy asset coming out within 15 minutes of each other. So they went for Crazy Glue first, because obviously biggest target obviously is the first one. And the majority of the fight happened on the grid with Crazy Glue. And then when it exploded, they went for the newest one, which I can't even remember what it was called. So it died, or it was in its last like 5 minutes at that point, because it had been up for a while, and they managed to just ping it. It was down to like the last 30 seconds, I think, of its reinforced timer when they managed to destroy it. So that one also went down. And then we were left with our 2 middle ground Fortizars that didn't come out for another half hour after that. And of course, Crazy Glue, when it popped, created a huge graveyard of just stuff. Just so much stuff.
Do you think that graveyard of stuff is actually one of the major reasons you were able to pull the first big fight around, though? I mean, because you guys were definitely losing ships faster than they were, right? The difference being...
Yeah. It was partially that, and partially because of those quartermasters we had that were still sitting in the fort. Because we still had, a decent amount of stuff that had been in the other forts. So whenever, the first fort went down, they basically relocated to the next supply of stuff, and people were also able to dock up there and get handed out ships. But I mean, in some ways it was faster to just go to Crazy Glue in some ways, but you weren't guaranteed what you were going to get. I mean, you wore to a can, you'd open it up, it could be ore and moon goo or whatever, PI and shit, or it could be, someone's cache of vigilance or some bullshit. So, I mean, it definitely was an interesting aspect of the fight, because then, both sides could go to the crazy wreckage.
Watching the live stream, I thought it was the most hilarious thing. Watching this giant fight with, you see the, I mean, I can't recall the name of the person who was actually streaming, but
King Ares was.
Yep, right. I mean, so we had, we had the 2 fleet blobs shooting each other, and every so often you'd see a pod warp to all the cans in the background, get in a ship, and just come on back. And you could just slowly tell that the attackers' fleet was getting less and less cohesive as their Macarials kept reshipping into whatever the fuck they could find in cans, because their blob started to get a lot less refined and spread out more, as some of the ships people were getting into maybe couldn't keep up with Macarials, or maybe they could, but they had to stay closer to actually be useful. So in the end, they stood down because they'd lost too many people. I know around a similar time, TD did show up with the heavy armor. That our intention was to try to just get under their guns with Tech 3 cruisers, which probably would have ended really poorly, but we didn't get to see how badly that was going to go, because by the time we got there, I think the fight was pretty much decided. So you guys, I mean, I can definitely remember some parts of this part clearly. We got onto talking in stations and had what was probably a bit of a premature victory lap on Matterall's podcast, right? in my podcasts, mixed answers. Some people on the attackers were swearing that, you know, they were always in it for the long haul and they were always going to be coming back for more after. Others say that maybe they were going to leave and then that only egged them over. I'm not sure we'll ever know the truth, since people that you would think would have been in the know end up claiming both sides of that camp. But
of course.
so you pulled off a victory, at least in the sense that for the time being, their fleet was beat up too much. You'd gotten enough reinforcements. Your fleet was still, I don't want to say standing strong, because it was beat up to all hell too. But I mean, ultimately, you guys are the ones that held the field, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, and so really, you know, the Matterall and the Talking at Stations podcast, I mean, to think of some context, I had been up for over 24 hours at this point, because we'd done our attempt at, you know, the downtime, you know, initiative to make that happen. And then the fight happened, and then the next day. So I was like, I mean, all of us, you know, we've been so invested in this. This has been such a, you know, it's our home we're fighting for. So obviously, when we were able to, you know, save 2 of our Fortizars, basically, even with Crazy down, we were also able to harvest all of the shit out of it at that point. And the fight itself went in our favor. And I know we weren't at the end of the day out of danger at all, obviously, but just the fact that we had been, you know, so on edge, so, you know, invested in this for so many days, to have this, given this victory, you know, we were able to snatch this one victory. And on top of that, regardless of it being a victory or not, this was the most ridiculous, intense, complicated, and biggest, and both from its value and people value, wormhole fight I'd ever been in. And it was not just like a shit show either. Like, it actually, you know, from both sides, people were tactical, people were warping around, we had good kills, we had bad kills, it was intense, it was, you know, it was everything that I want in a fight in this game. You know, like, at the end of the day, looking back, that fight is one I will remember forever. And so to be living on that high, just, you know, it's just amazing. Like, we wanted to talk about it, you know? Like, that was a fight worth talking about.
My perspective too.
Like, it didn't even have to do with us just exactly winning, just the fact that happened. Like, those fights don't happen very often in wormhole space. I mean, they just don't. And even, you know, looking back on the last eviction of this kind of magnitude, I mean, there was the, you know, the Keepstar kill from Inner Hell, but really before that, it had, the one I've been involved in was Nova, and that was a fucking shit show.
well, you don't want to talk about Nova.
That was a clusterfuck and a half.
Nova was a dark time, and no one that was involved in Nova wants to talk about Nova.
Right. Exactly. And so you have, you know, stuff like that. This is a once in an Eve lifetime kind of fight. And especially for, you know, for a podcast like Talking at Stations, where, you know, most of the time they're talking about nullsec stuff, I really wanted to be able to bring this level of excitement and intensity to the rest of Eve, because this is something that we want to show. This is what the fuck can happen in wormhole space, you know? And I thought that was a really great chance. And I thought that Victor was great to be on there. He gave some great perspective. I mean, I thought it was well done. And yeah, we were, you know, pretty excited and pretty high from a recent victory, but it wasn't our intention, at least it wasn't my intention to gloat. It was to share how epic this was, because it was and it needed to be shared. And yeah, I know some people got kind of, you know, well, they got too smug, we gotta smack them down and stuff. But I feel like in a lot of ways, some of that also had to do with how much bullshit was being spread prior to that fight. Like on Reddit and on Tweetfleet and all these channels, the attackers, they were just, I mean, the circle jerk was real. I mean, it was intense. And then to have it turned at the last minute, obviously it changed the narrative, it changed the spin. And I feel like a lot of people probably, you know, saw that as them being kind of like almost memed into a corner in a lot of ways. Like, they talk such a big game, and then to have it end like that, they couldn't let it end like that, you know? And like, I've seen a lot of wormhole evictions in my, you know, in the past in wormhole space. And a lot of times you have a big fight like this, and this is what it's all about. It's not about straight up burning someone out. It's about having these big fights. And I've seen a lot of groups that they have these big fights, they'll do this eviction, and then it's like, yeah, we got that big eviction. We got that fight. That's what it's all about. That's Eve. People fought. We had a crazy thing. And then that's it. And they go on, they go about their Eve life. And so, in some ways I was hoping that would be the case this time, but, it ended up not being. Obviously, they ended up hunkering down, staying for another week. And I think personally, not just because it was my home and they ended up coming at us again, I personally think it was a mistake just for their corp and their morale. I mean, I got to the point when we saw that they were coming back for more. It was like on Tuesday, I think we had like a couple days basically where we tried to get some reinforcements in and get some more ships and all that kind of stuff. And then they, hit a whole control on like a Tuesday morning at like 8 a.m. or something when I was at work. And I just, I saw what was going on and I looked at my guys and I was like, I'm not going to expect you guys to be on until the timers, because I couldn't demand that of my guys. Like, it had been so much effort and so it was so tiring and it was just exhausting, and I didn't want to put my guys through that because it's miserable. Trying to watch Whole Control is miserable, and especially for like another whole week, it's just not fun. And at the end of the day, this is a game.
I'm gonna nip your rant here in the butt just a little bit so Val can get some words in.
I'm sorry.
He had me on Discord. He's like, when she's all done, I have things I want to say. So
you should message me.
The floor is yours, Val.
I could go on forever.
Typical. Yeah, I just wanted to give like our perspective, like even just up until the first Fortizar fight, because we were getting like properly dumpstered for basically 4 days straight on every single attempt to either get Whole Control or to fight them in any way. So like leading up to that, we had fresh defeats in our mind all along the way, and then like right before we're ready to undock, I go to the fax pilots who are in a separate TeamSpeak channel, and I'm like, guys, there's like 120 max here. You might just get volleyed. Because part of our inexperience is that we didn't really put buffer on faxes, which didn't really think that was going to be an issue, because we expected about half the max, to fight us in like this kind of level of eviction. We didn't expect 120, 140. So like saying that to them prior to the fight was definitely very spooky. And then just during the fight, I just want to give massive credits to Evelyn for who got us a lot of the warp-ins. We basically split it like 50-50 on the warp-ins. Either he would give us a nice warp, or like it would be a mix of combat warps, or just like a Kulki getting us a warp-in. Because like we probably got like 9 or 10 just solid like warp-ins on them, where we land within 20 kilometers or at 0. And like just the ability to do that, to find gaps in their sabers, really allowed the Hydras and just carriers just to, that's how we were able to trade it all. That's how like Croesus was able to lose like 7 vigilance and actually tackle things. So that was just incredible to be able to do and to get done. And the only other part I wanted to bring up was what sealed the deal, in my opinion anyway, at the end of the first Fortizar fight, or second one, whatever, the first Saturday, whatever you want to call it, was I kind of intentionally left a fax behind because he just wasn't fully aligned, and then the idea was we're gonna let him get tackled. They're gonna focus this Nanazu, and then we're gonna warp in on them, and then like the warp in was like almost so perfect that we landed in front of where they were going, and they just kept burning in front of us, and we were able to call their anchor Vec primary. And then from what I'm hearing from after the fight from the other guys is that they just their guys just spaghettied everywhere. And like there was just no anchor. It was just chaos when Vec went down. They didn't really have a secondary anchor for whatever reason, but like that moment right there was just sick.
Yeah, we had a lot of people who really, like a few people who were really exceptional in making it happen on that big fight, and that's what I will remember from those fights. Because then the next week, they were able to bring in more people. They got Whole Control again, and they brought in a ton of people, and we pretty much got to the point where we couldn't invest in them in this much anymore. Like I couldn't tell my guys or ask my guys to take off work or to alarm clock for more shit. So because of the intensity and the craziness and all the shit that followed the first fight, a lot of people wanted to get in on it, and so a lot of people joined for the next week. because they just wanted in on it, like a lot of wormhole groups that hadn't really gotten involved. And I think the attackers were willing to, invite just about anybody who would come. So when it came to the next week, I mean, it's not super noteworthy because basically they saw what we did the first time and they learned from it and they were ready for it and they had even more people. So, in the end.
I think just minor note that I think I guess it's not that minor. Round 2, like the final fights over, last stand, everything's burning. Was the largest fight Wormhole Space has ever had in regards to like number of actual pilots all over the place. Lots of redundancies, I'm sure. But at the time, I compared the BRs and did some number crunching and compared it to Nova. Your hot mic.
Yes, you're broadcasting.
Sorry.
And there were actually more people involved in the round 2 of Hydra than there were in the Battle of Nova. And there were a lot of people involved in the Battle of Nova too, but not quite to this scale. I mean, just like you said, both sides had brought in just a little bit of, everybody they could get their hands on.
I mean, we basically still had our main group from the week. I mean, we didn't ask everybody from, Exit Strategy or TD Center or anyone else to stay. And so when they did their whole control gain at Tuesday, we pretty much were locked at that point and weren't able to get a lot of people in. So our numbers didn't increase over that week, but theirs did by a huge amount. So, it's kind of too bad because, I mean, obviously a lot of people wanted in on that action because it was, I mean, the first battle of Hydra was ridiculous, and it was great. But the second one ended up being it was just too much, what are we going to do, at that point. So we always decided from the very beginning that no matter what happened, we were going to fight to the very end. We weren't just going to give up. We weren't going to SDL our shit. We weren't just going to sit at the undock and say, fuck it. We were going to bring it. And we did. And we went down in a blaze of glory. And I couldn't ask for more at that point, So, I mean, at the end of the day, we lost the final fight. All 4 of our forts went down, and it's sad to see it all come down, obviously. But I still, regardless of that, I'm still so proud of my guys because they hung together and they stayed through it and they pushed through, and we showed that we weren't going to just back down. We're going to bring it to the very end. We're going to fight with our all, and we're going to stick together, and we're going to make it work. And even if we lose, we're still going to, give it our all. And I feel like in a lot of evictions, if you look at them, you can't say that about a lot of them. People will give up at some point and just like SD away or micro jump away from the enemies and, all that, the micro John Dune or whatever the fuck it was. And, we weren't going to do that. And I'm happy that we didn't because I feel like it shows the kind of group that we are. Or at least who I want us to be.
Very fair. So, I want to dig into just 2 other things, and then that'll be it for tonight. And these are, I think, the things that people are maybe most interested in, or at least these are the things that really only you guys could talk about. And that is, what happened after. So, and you can get into it with as much detail as you really want to. I know if I go digging, I mean, I think your alliance meetings were leaked. There's been a lot of leaked alliance meetings over the past couple months, but so at least at highest level, if you only have to answer a couple questions, what made your corp decide to move back to a C4, and why a pulsar? The questions that I'm sure I have, or that I'd love to hear you guys explain, and I'm sure are burning a hole in some people's heads out there. So your corp just lost your home. Maybe for most of them, pretty much everything they had in Eve. I probably not a unfair assumption. Walk me through how you guys decided to pick yourselves up and move back into another C4, and then a little bit about why back into another C4. Don't let the answer be prompt. That's a bad answer.
No. So there was that one alliance meeting or whatever that was leaked. I will say that it was one of many we had, because we wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to give some input on the decision of where we moved to. That one was obviously the most meme worthy, so it's the one that got leaked, which is kind of funny. But no, the end result of our decision wasn't prom. We had a lot of factors we were considering, and we did highly consider a C5 as one of our options. But part of it came down to, for me as a leader of our corp, we were homeless. We didn't have anything. Most of us had lost everything in the eviction. And I wanted to pick a home that would give us the most opportunities to get back to where we were. Not exactly like looking for an upgrade, because we just been evicted. Like, I can't be looking at like, oh yeah, we're gonna really step up our game at this point, because that's not the time you want to do that. Like, we have a lot of things that we need to consider. We got to rebuild. We got to get people back their money, their ships. We got to get back to our old way of life before we can look at growing further. So we were looking at options. We had, a couple ideas of where we wanted to go. And the idea of the Pulsar came up as kind of a joke and a meme. Just like, the Pulsar dream, let's do it. And it got to the point where I wanted something a little bit different than Hydra. And so the Pulsar with the different statics offered enough of a change and a little bit of a difference that it was new and a little bit, exciting to have new opportunities for doctrines and changes and stuff like that. It definitely still had to have a C5 static. That was a must-have. The Pulsars have C4 statics as their second, which is fine. But I was thinking that this would give us the best opportunity to get back to being us, to being an active PvP wormhole entity. We needed to grow. We needed to grow fast, and we were in a very vulnerable position. And I didn't want to put us in a position where we would be just immediately evicted right again, because at that moment, you're very vulnerable. It's very fragile, and I didn't want to put us in a situation where we would just get burned out again. Because also on top of that, I did have Whole Control messaging me, basically telling me that if I didn't kick prom, that they would immediately evict us again. Like, just straight up.
That surrendering one of your population gives your whole empire a 10% happiness mollis, right, Keskora?
Well, I mean, basically, when Prom joined us, he joined us with a big group of people. And I didn't want to just kick somebody because someone else told me to, for one, because I feel like that sets a bad message to my group and a bad precedent to my corp. So I had to look at it, basically as what is going to be the best decision for my group. And at that point, I didn't want to just kick somebody because someone told me to, because I feel like that would have serious ramifications.
That's a really, really bad decision.
Right. I mean, it's a serious decision, and it would cause major consequences. So I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And so we, that was also, though, sitting in the back of my mind, that we had to be up and running in a defensible position as soon as possible. Absolutely. Like that, all of these things were kind of factoring in. So, when we were looking at wormholes, we have a new one now. It's called Nexus, which is what we call our new home. And it seemed like it offered the best chances for us to get back to our way of life as quickly as possible in the best way possible. And so that's why we ended up going with it. I'm not saying that we're going to be here for forever. I don't know if we will. The future, well, who knows? I mean, we're a different corp now than we were 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago. So I can't say what we're going to be in 6 months from now. Who knows? We'll be growing. We'll be keeping up, and hopefully, we'll still be here. I think we will. I feel pretty good about that. But it's just that I don't want to say like, oh well, this is just temporary, because I don't think it is. But I feel like at the time there were a lot of factors that fed into our decision to move back to a C4, and in the end, I'm happy with the decision we made.
All right. Well, so I guess that's how we made that decision. How's that working out for you? The very last thing on our bullet list here is, how is Pos Party doing roughly 3 months after you guys got kicked out of Hydra? How is Nexus working out for Pos Party?
I think it's working out really well, personally. I mean, you know, whenever you have such a big event like an eviction, you expect people are going to leave, or you know, it's going to be the end of the corp, or all that kind of shit. You're going to fail skate. We lost surprisingly few people, which is amazing. You know, like I mean, we had a few people that actually had said they were going to leave before the eviction and stayed with us all the way through until the very end, and then left after we moved in. We had some people, you know, that didn't want to move back to a C4. We did have some people that didn't like the pulsar, you know, kind of stuff like that. But in the end, we lost only a couple. Like I was very surprised. For the most part, everyone, you know, we spent like a couple months with our heads down, you know, rebuilding, making ISK. Some people had to take some time off because of the burnout, which is totally understandable. I mean, given what happened. So, I mean, I did too. I had to take a break because I was just so worn out, you know, emotionally. It's crazy that you can get so emotional over this game. But in the end, you know, we spent like a month or so rebuilding, getting our shit back together, pulling ourselves back up, and now we're pretty much, you know, back to being the group we are, which is amazing, you know? Like I'm so proud of my guys, and I feel so great that everyone was able to, you know, chip in together, and we had people who were, you know, scanning and building and bringing in structures and hauling and running ISK fleets, and it's just crazy to see everyone come together. And I think it speaks a lot to who we are as an entity that we can still be here after such a big event. And in the end, you know, some groups aren't here anymore.
Is that
Wonder why that is.
is that a subtle reference to Shekel?
I mean,
Because that I think that
I know it's now lit.
that was super subtle. Because I mean,
well,
it's
yeah,
been thrown out there like 6 times in chat that, you know, after all this, you know, for everything that was the Battle of Hydra, 3 months later, Shekel's the one that imploded and fell apart and is now, you know, their pilots going, you know, off to the wind to join a variety of different wormhole corps, and Pospey's, from their own words at least so far, doing pretty good in Nexus. Did anyone from Shekel apply to you guys?
no. And I don't think we
I
did.
guess that's not.
That'd be really weird if
I
they
can't.
did.
Yeah, I
don't-
can't say that's
I can't.
surprising, but
I can't imagine anyone would, honestly. You know, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I feel like you know, in a lot of ways, it kind of shows who we are as a corp versus who they are as a corp, because you know they went so hard and they were so focused on the memes and the craziness, and we tried to stay out of it really hard. You know, we tried to really focus on who we were and not get involved in all that shit. And I had to leave. I had to remove myself from all that crap because it got very personal against me. And you know, I couldn't handle the tweet fleet and the bullshit and the drama and the Reddit and all the crap that was being said about me and my husband and who we were as people. It got very, very toxic and poisonous. And I wanted to focus on us as a group, as a community, as a, you know, because that's who we kind of are at the end of the day. And I feel like that as long as we have this community, we can weather the storm and we can come back strong. And I feel like that is what keeps me playing this game, you know, at the end of the day. And I'm not gonna lie, I mean, seeing Shekel fail skate and collapse does, you know, make me feel a little vindicated. I mean, how could I not, you know? Like I'm not the kind of person that could just sit here and be like, ha, fuck those guys, oh, and like meme about them collapsing, because I feel like I'm not that kind of person. And I mean, I know it's a game and people say, oh, it's just a game. But this is in a way, it's more than just a game to me. You know, these are real people. These are my friends. These are people I've seen in real life. I spend hours playing with them, talking with them, you know, spending my life with them and doing things for, you know, for this corp. And just, you know, I can't go and be super toxic as a result either, because it's, you know, it's more than just a game to me.
sure.
So I won't shed any tears for them falling apart. That's for sure. But I'm not gonna sit here.
You can
and
meme on
gloat
them good
either.
at E&E. I'm pretty sure Steel's coming, so you can make fun of that.
I bet he's not gonna be picking us up at the airport again. At least I'll say that.
But he would pick me up. I bet he would if I asked him.
All right. Any other notes you guys wanted to throw out there before I wrap up? So I guess out to the audience there. I always forget to do this sooner because they're on, I think, like a 1-minute delay. If anybody has questions that you want answered before we wrap up, please let me know. Tiny wants to know if we have heard about our Lord and Savior, the Enyo.
I mean,
How does the Enyo work in a pulsar?
I have heard tale of such glories as the Enyo. Someone's asking why I didn't vote for EXO for CSM, and I'll say that of course I fucking voted for EXO for CSM, and I let everyone in my corp know that they should vote for you, and I'm still fucking salty about that shit.
So it is currently my intention to have another podcast episode this weekend in which we're going to cover a couple different wormhole things. One of which is the lack of a wormhole CSM rep this year, which is, I wish I could say probably not going to matter, but my experience with Eve suggests that it's going to end up biting us at some point. But yeah. So we'll get into that a bit more, but I'm sorry if I let people down, and I'm just as bummed out that as many of you, I'm sure, that we don't have wormhole representation on the CSM this year. So.
Well, you certainly didn't let me down, and I don't think anyone thinks that.
I got a couple grumpy people, but we'll work around.
Well, I will space mom them so hard.
We just need 2 of them to get thrown out for being, like racist 2 years ago, like Creature, and then we're golden. Because if 2 people get thrown off, then I'm on the CSM, because I'm the second runner up to take a seat. So, or CCP could just decide to add people to the thing, and we'd get there. But discussion for another time. I'm not seeing any directed questions, so I think we're probably good. So the last slide that I have, just because I haven't been doing enough of this, really, is mentioning to the people that this is hopefully applicable to, that Eve Northeast is coming up in about a month and a half. It's in August in upstate New York this year. Brilliant artwork here done by Keskora. And I would love to see as many people there that want to come. It's always a wormhole space heavy meetup. Last year, over half the people that were actually there were wormholers. So, if you're like, oh, I don't want to go hang out with a bunch of null people, it's actually the opposite. And the nullsec people that I talk to that are sometimes on the fence about coming are trying to figure out if they want to come hang out with all those weird wormhole people. But as far as I'm aware, I'm already aware of a pretty good smattering of wormhole space people that will be in attendance. So if coming to a Eve meetup where we drink a bunch, eat a bunch of food, hang out for a really fun weekend is up your alley and you can come, love to see everybody there. So we'll see how that goes. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I'll get this uploaded to YouTube ASAP. Thank you both for coming on to chat and tell the world about Pause Party, Hydra, and Nexus. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun to talk about, wormhole stuff. I could talk forever. I'm sorry if I got too ranty. It's just, it's this kind of game. It gets you all fired up. It's why I like Eve and I love wormholes.
Alrighty. Thank you, everybody, and I hope everybody has a good rest of your Sunday. I know this episode was a bit late. That's just when we could fit everybody together, but I will hopefully be seeing and talking to everybody again later this week, probably Friday, but you'll see it on Twitter as soon as I've pinned in the date and time. But we'll get going. Have a good night, everybody.